Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about The Well of Ascension by Brandon Sanderson, book 2 of the Mistborn series. So this is going to be my, I don't know, it's probably going to be one of my multiple rereads, but this is definitely a re-review in anticipation of Stormlight 5 coming out in December. So because this is a re-review, I'm not going to go into much about the plot or anything like that. I'm just going to kind of talk about one of the main things about the structure of the story that I really find enjoyable, and I think that Brandon did a really good job with. So please leave a comment down below. Let me know what your thoughts on this book and the rest of the Mistborn series compared to your first read as compared to a reread, because this series is all about revisiting the Cosmere. So let me know how you felt about it the first time you read it and how you compare it to reading it again now. So yeah, leave me a comment in the comment section down below, because I'm finding my experience on this reread to be interestingly different than previous rereads. So I'd be really interested to know if anybody else is having a different experience this time around. So yeah, with that being said, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and check out my Patreon. The link is in the description. So with that being said, let's begin. So, The Well of Ascension is, of course, as I said before in my Final Empire review, it's a huge step up in the writing quality of Brandon Sanderson. He remains consistent throughout this trilogy, mostly because he wrote all three books, like within, not one setting, but, one right after the other. So it wasn't like years in between. So in my opinion, that's the primary reason why the quality stays consistent through the three books. But the thing that does not stay consistent is his use of archetypical story structure, or the use of specific types of tropes. So in the first one, Brandon uses a heist storyline archetype along with the My Fair Lady slash Pygmalion kind of story trope, along with the hero's journey, in order to flesh out the world and kind of place his story on top of. So he kind of abandons that here, even though I can't think of a typical archetypical story structure that will work with what happens in these next two books. But I think the closest structure that is, an archetype that he uses is really one that is indicative of dramatic politicking, because these two books are very much more politically driven. So now that the final empire has fallen, we are now trying to recreate a government. So essentially, it's a democratic monarchy where Elend is the king still, but he is trying to use this council of people to essentially help govern Luthadel and, basically bring about a lot of the ideas that were fostered through his reading of philosophy and the various histories and stuff. So it's a really noble effort, and it's a really cool thing that he's doing, and it kind of shows us that he is actually a good character and a good person and stuff. But of course, that kind of stuff does not work out easily. So that's kind of one of the main frameworks of this story, and it's kind of the catalyst for all the politicking that happens. So not only does Elend have a lot to deal with that is just like political maneuvering and trying to come up with different ideas, there's also like pretty much every other character that is trying to help. But on top of that, just generally trying to run the city, the new, like, recreated Luthadel, more or less, like, that's already difficult enough. But then there's an army that's at the city gates. So they're basically being besieged by one of the other people who have set themselves up as kings in one of the other dominances. Here's another nobleman named Ashweather Set, and he is basically trying to come after Luthadel because they think the Atium cache is still in Luthadel. So Luthadel is like the gem in the kingdom. Like, all the other dominances, no matter how well they can maintain control, they need money. And the greatest source of money they know of is the Lord Ruler's Atium stash. And everyone assumes it's somewhere in Luthadel. So all these other forces are trying to take over Luthadel. So we already have a bunch of politicking and reformation of an entire government, and basically the abolition of what is essentially slavery or serfdom. Like, so we have an entire new kind of, I guess, peasant class they would be. But like, so there's just already a lot going on in the city, and then on top of that, they're under siege. And then another army shows up, and then they're besieged by that one. So they're being besieged by two armies, and the people that are helping govern the city are not all on Elend's page. So they're basically working against him. So there's so many things going on in this story, and there's so many different moving pieces. So the way I think of it, specifically on this reread, I just kept coming back to the idea of spinning plates. It feels like Brandon is running back and forth, spinning plates, and he's trying to keep, keep them going. Like, he'll, when one plate slows down, he has to run back and like speed it back up, and then it slows down over here and he has to run. It's very much that. That's very much how it feels in this story to me. Because we bounce through so many different kind of plot lines. A lot of them are like a bunch of plots that make up a greater plot. They're like, subplots that make up a greater plot, but there's multiple of those kind of things that are happening. So it just gives the feeling that a lot is happening. Because dealing with Ellen alone, like his politicking with the city and stuff like that, that alone has multiple facets to it. He's trying to write these proposals in order to get the council of people to, basically agree with him to parlay with Set, and then to parlay with his father Strath Venture, who's running one of the other armies. And so like he's trying to do that, but they're also like pushing against it while he's trying to like do the Reformation thing. And then he's trying to be king but trying to be equal. But then like there's just so much going on within his storyline alone that of course affects the other characters, but it just gives again this image of Brandon trying to keep all these plates spinning. And that's just with Ellen. So with Vin, granted, she has less multiple plot lines, but apart from all the stuff that's going on with the city, like trying to help Ellen and stuff and be the support for him, and also being his bodyguard, she's also dealing with the fact that she finds out that one of the crew members have been replaced by a Kandra. So she's kind of trying to find this mole, but trying not to let anybody know that that's what she's looking for, because, she doesn't want to alert the mole. So she's like keeping that secret and stuff and worrying about that constantly and trying to figure out who the mole is. And then on top of that, she's having like questions and stuff about our relationship with Ellen, because we of course continue a lot of the character development that was done so brilliantly in Final Empire. Like, so now instead of Vin being worried about being able to trust people, whether or not they'll betray her and stuff, she now has people she trusts and that she loves. But now her issue is that she is insecure about how she feels in relation to them, or if she deserves their love, and like how they feel in relation to her, and like, is she a monster for her skill level with allomancy in comparison to like a regular person. So a lot of it has to do with insecurities and stuff. And so she is basically dealing with relationship stuff, because her and Ellen obviously can't be very coupley during this time because there's just so much going on. So she's dealing with that. And then there's this new Mistborn. Apart from just dealing with relationship with Ellen stuff, she's also acting as his bodyguard, and people are sending other allomancers after him and after people and stuff, so, and after her, so she's constantly fighting and stuff, so she's dealing with that. And then there's this other Mistborn that keeps making himself known. He's like working as an ally to her, helping her out in some cases, but also is like taunting her, teasing her, and like sparring with her, and like, and it's very unclear exactly where his alliances is and stuff. So like she's kind of dealing with that while not actually telling anybody else about it. And then also she's dealing with the Kandra issue. She has Tinsoon / Orser with her, but she is like holding resentment against him because he ate Kelsier's bones in order to take on his form, in order to basically help spark the rebellion last book. And so she has just this kind of it's kind of an effect of her mourning of Kelsier more than anything. So she's essentially just very, she basically develops this prejudice towards the Kandra because of her mourning for Kelsier. But to watch her actually go through that and kind of realize that it's not justified and is actually really stupid, and it's pretty hypocritical considering the things she's been through. So it's like a lot of fun to see her kind of work her way out of that and end up actually developing this very close and kind of true relationship with him. So I really like that plot line a lot, and I think it was handled pretty well. And on top of all that other stuff that's going on, we of course have Sazed, who is basically trying to fulfill his mission, as a keeper, and going to spread the information that he and the other keepers had been keeping for so long, and trying to teach it to the masses again. So he's trying to teach farming and agriculture type stuff, and religions and stuff to the Skaa. But there's more going on to the point where they like, we don't care. Like, we're not interested in what you're trying to teach us. And half of them don't even believe that the Lord Ruler is actually dead. So a lot of them just think this is like a test and the Lord Ruler is coming back. I mean, after all, he is their God. So it makes sense that they would think that, even when he's dead, he's not dead, So it makes sense. But so Sazed is dealing with that, and then he's like, when he's around in these other villages, he learns that the Mist are staying out longer during the day, which is not a thing that typically happens, and that the Mist are now apparently killing people. People who are out in the Mist having these like seizures and stuff, and they're dying, and some aren't dying, but like people are dying to the point where an entire Ska village, more or less, like all barricaded themselves in their hovels, and some starved to death and died because they were too afraid to leave the house because the mist wouldn't go away even in the morning. So there's clearly something going on there. So he's dealing with that. And then by the time he gets back to Luthadel, one of the other plates that Ellen is spinning, which is this terrace woman, Tindwyl, who's basically trying to show him how to be a proper king, at least in comparison, at least her opinion of a proper king through the reflection of all her histories and stuff that she know of past rulers and stuff before the god, not the god king, the Lord ruler. And so he's also dealing with that. So we get at least a combination of a couple plot lines when Sazed gets back. So Sazed ends up hooking up with Tindwyl, and a lot of the information he starts to discover about the deepness, about the mist, and all this kind of stuff leads to him working with Tindwyl, and they end up having this long, like, deep study session where they're basically trying to uncover all the mysteries and stuff about the logbook and about Alendi and all the stuff that happened in the past during the time when the Lord Ruler eventually took up the power of the Well of Ascension and became the Lord Ruler. So they're going through all that. So there's just so many different things that are happening in the story. Again, as I said, it's just a bunch of spinning plates, and every time one slows down, Brandon runs to that one to speed it back up. And as soon as that happens, another one slows down, so he has to run to the other one. So it's constantly a game of keeping these plates spinning, which I think ultimately is the reason why I still enjoy this book, because I don't generally like very heavy politicking in books. It's one of the reasons why I have a lot of trouble with A Song of Ice and Fire. Like, the way of writing is a little odd for me, and just the kind of that type of politicking to me just works better in a TV show form versus a written form. So it's just hard for me to really get into it. But that being pretty much the only type of archetypical structure Brandon uses in this book, I think it kind of lends itself pretty well, because the way he has so many spinning plates, I think the way it all structures and plays out works better for me than something like A Song of Ice and Fire, because the nature of the running back to the other plates and keeping them spinning, as I explain it, like that idea, the way he does that keeps me intrigued in each of the plot lines. So most of the plot lines do end up kind of hitting a point where they kind of dull and start to slow down and are not as interesting as others. So as soon as that started to happen, Brandon will jump from that plot point and go to one of the other ones. He's like runs to another plate and start that one spinning again. So he does it well enough for me throughout Well of Ascension that it essentially stops the book from being ever boring or ever feeling like the pacing like suffers or anything. It really is, I think, the thing that saves the entire experience for me, because again, I think a lot of the stuff that actually happens within the politicking of the story is not that interesting. A lot of it is very standard and kind of typical and just kind of easy to understand backstabbing. Nothing of it is just, it's not that incredible, in my opinion. It's just very run-of-the-mill, classical kind of medieval fantasy type stuff, like that has to deal with politicking. So it's not that riveting, I guess I'll say. But again, the way in which Brandon makes use of these multiple subplots that make up these plots, I think is, again, the thing that keeps it totally enjoyable. There's only two things in the story that I don't enjoy. This is the not even subtle, this is the pseudo love triangle of Ellen, Vin, and Zane. Like, I do not like Zane pretty much the way he's kind of a whiner, and he like comes in between like this couple that like was set up very, very well, and it just kind of causes Vin to have these internal thoughts and struggles that I think, like, they're not out of character for her, but I think I like had come to a point where I was expecting her to not fall for this like high school level of potential tempted, creation of the love triangle thing, because it very much seems like there is nothing about Zane that is truly compatible with Vin, apart from the fact that they're both Mistborn. And that seems to be the entire basis of him trying to date her or whatever. And that, and the idea of him thinking she can save him from the voice in his head and stuff. So that entire thing just doesn't work. And there's like a lot of stuff in that storyline where they're having conversations where Vin, quite frankly, could just like, say a single statement and kind of clear the air and like stop his pursuit and stuff. And she doesn't. And she has this level of doubt in her relationship with Ellen that I don't think is justified at all. And it feels like a little try hard, in my opinion. It feels like the idea of this pseudo love triangle was more important than the ability to organically execute it. That's kind of how I feel about it. It feels too much. I feel the hand of the writer too much with this plot line, so I don't enjoy it. But also, the other one that I didn't really enjoy, as I've said before in my other reviews and my re-reviews of Well of Ascension, I do not care for the Tendril Sazed relationship. I like their coupling. I like them together. I think they're actually quite compatible, and I think it works. I just don't think it's constructed that well in the book itself. The text of their relationship is lacking severely, in my opinion, for the level of emotional complexity and emotional depth that is implied that says it has. Granted, I know their relationship is obviously unconventional because she has a lot of trauma in her past from being like a breeder and stuff, and he, of course, was mutilated at birth to make him a eunuch. So he doesn't even consider himself a true man or whatever, even though most of that's perception. But I understand that their relationship could not possibly progress in a very typical way, and I even totally am on board with the idea that they will fall in love through their love of scholarship. I really like that angle of it. It makes a lot of sense to me. It's just in text, it feels like that was just a all-nighter. It's like they pulled an all-nighter in a library and suddenly says it is, everything that happens to him in Hero of Ages, essentially. Like the aftermath of it, I think, is just kind of overblown for what we actually get in this story. So yeah, those are the two things that I don't really care for with the structure, but I do think the departure from those typical archetypical structures Brandon used in Final Empire to this kind of dramatic politicking, kind of plate spinning methodology, it's a pretty interesting transition because you would think it's very abrupt and wouldn't work or be compatible, but I think it's indicative of the fact that he wrote these very close together, that it just works. It works really well. The structure of it comes together ultimately, but those, just apart from those two little plot lines that I don't think are really really great. But I think the use of this kind of plate spinning method really, really worked really well. He actually continues this on in Hero of Ages, but to a slightly lesser degree. There are fewer plates, but it is still very much a plate spinning kind of methodology. So that's kind of the main structural part of it I want to talk about. And to be honest, I feel like I repeated myself quite a lot. But I also want to touch on a bit of the character development that we get in the Well of Ascension, the continuation of the character development. I already mentioned the fact that Vin, her development is a lot about relationships, and she goes from being she goes from being untrusting and not really comfortable with relationships pretty much in general to being very attached to the people that she's developed relationships with and is becoming insecure about them. So I think that's a really, really interesting direction for a character to go, and it's a really, really good kind of extra development for her character. It's a really good direction for her character development, essentially. And the rest of the crew, we kind of leave a lot of the characters we got to know pretty decently in the first book. We don't get too much extra development on them, like Breeze and Ham and stuff. We kind of get a little more depth to it, but it's not nearly as extensive as some of the conversations we got in the Final Empire. But we do get a little bit more of Doxson and Clubs, specifically because they die at the end of the book. So I feel like that's why we get a little bit more. But again, there is some stuff in their storylines that I would have liked to be fleshed out more. There's questions about Clubs and Spook's relationship that I have that just are never answered. I'm confused as to why they're not closer, considering the way in which Clubs rescued Spook when he was a kid. So it's just I feel like there's just more there. And I feel like a lot of his development was played as catch up in the Hero of Ages, which we'll talk about later. But yeah, and Doxson, we get a bit more of him, but again, it's really just kind of deepening some of the stuff that we got from the Final Empire, learning more about why he can't stand the noble and stuff, and even kind of entering in the conflict of the idea. This idea that he realizes that Ellen is actually a good person and he's a noble. So he kind of has this internal conflict of, if this nobleman was actually a good person, then that means that other noble people could, other noblemen or whatever could be good people. And that means that the stuff he and Kelsier did to the noble people and the people that were allies to them, like, aren't, as cleanly justified as he assumed. So it leaves him in this place of, like, being terrified to think about that, because then he's going to have to, get introspective in a way that he just does not want to and probably can't really handle. So I like that development. I think it's interesting, but we didn't get nearly enough of it. I would have liked to seen how that would play out, but ultimately he gets killed, and so we just don't even have to continue it. So it's like, eh. But yeah. So I really like the development that happens in the story. I think, of course, Vin's development in relation to her relationships and stuff, I think is the best done. But I really do enjoy the way in which pretty much all the characters developed. So again, yeah, even on my umpteenth reread of the Mistborn series, I still really, really enjoy these books. And I think the more I reread these, the more like fun little in-depth things I'll find with them. So again, please in the comments, let me know in comparison to your first read through Mistborn and the Well of Ascension, let me know how you feel about it upon this reread or any recent reread you've done. Let me know how your opinions change from one read to the other. I'm really interested to know about that. So yeah, let me know about that in the comments down below. And of course, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and please check out the Patreon if you want to support the channel in that way. But of course, you can like the video, subscribe to the channel, classic support methods. And of course, I will talk to y'all next time. Peace.